But basically, right around that November time was when COVID kind of started existing here. Like, it was late in 2019, and then like kind of through 2020 is when it started really going. And COVID hit, man, that was like such a wild time to be a new nurse, because I like kind of just came off of orientation, was just feeling like I kind of knew what was going on. Standards felt pretty high of like, oh, everyone's constantly coming to me, telling me, okay, this is what you need to chart on. These are the things you miss. You know, these are the things you're doing great at. And I was doing well. And then COVID hit, and all of a sudden, basically what happened is we have this thing called a medical guard unit where I work, which is normally used for prisoners and like psychiatric state hospital patients. So it's literally prison unit. I mean, barred windows. There's a sally port to go in. We drop off any phones, anything. The nurses' station's behind bulletproof glass. No seats on the toilets. Nothing you could like pull off to like use as a weapon.
How do you sit down on the toilet? You don't?
It's just like a
toilet rim.
Fixed bedpan. Like, think of that. It's just this metal thing like that. It's designed to have 2 guards in the room at all times, and there's no light switches even. The light switches require a key outside to turn the lights on. Yeah.
Gnarly.
It's quite an environment.
Prison.
Yeah, literally prison. No call bells either. The call bells are the guards have them normally. Like, it's wild. Anyways,
you just hand it to them. You're like, hey, press this.
So this is a little bit like when COVID. They were trying to figure out how to make it safer, because basically the MGU bed, or they do have they're hooked to the wall. They're a little bit different. They have a special connection, and they have, because the patients are supposed to be chained to the beds normally, have 2 restraints on at all times, any extremities, but they're usually able to, like, if they need the call button, they can press it basically with their hand on the bed, but there's no like regular button. But we ran out of MGU beds. Like, there just weren't enough for how many people we were putting in the COVID unit. And also the nurses' station's behind bulletproof glass in this like little corner. So there were just issues with, not being able to see or address the patients fast enough. And the solution was that someone went out and bought a bunch of the restaurant ringers and just like gave them to all the patients. And I feel like I have PTSD from those things, because like whenever I'm in a restaurant or I hear someone goes, I'm just like it takes me back to being like gowned up, and I'm just like sweating, like, oh, because like I remember you just be sitting in the station or like out there, you just hear like, and some people they're confused or they're scared because it's a prison and they're already demented, don't know where they are, hypoxic because of the lack of oxygen a lot of times, and they're just like, no, look at this bell, like ding ding, they're just slamming it. And it was rough, because it's like they need a way to call you too. But yeah, it definitely just like shook practice up a lot at that point. We and eventually state shut that down too. Like, once things got calm enough where not everyone was like on fire, they came and were like, hey, you can't use that unit for COVID patients. Like, this is just not okay, basically. And we're like, yeah, we agree, this sucks. The concept, I would say, for any new nurse who's just thinking about what it was like, it's just like, imagine having an entire extra unit of patients and no staff hired for it. They just suck resources from everywhere else. So every unit was actually pretty terrible to be on. And COVID, actually, I remember when it was at its worst, and because it was like kind of scary and new, I preferred to be in the COVID unit, because they would pull so many resources from the other units that, like, at least you were in like a confined unit with, they would try to keep your ratio at 4 or 5 too. You wouldn't go out of ratio as much in COVID. Breaks were pretty much out of the question. You would go from when you got there until the end. And it was just like, you're just waiting for night shift to show up, and then just be like, oh my God.
Literally hoping they show up.
Yeah.
Would you have to stay? Did you ever have to stay over?
Yeah, if someone was late or something. I mean,
okay.
Yeah, or like a charge someone, management, our our director is really awesome, and she would come in sometimes and like middle of the night and just help out. So it was like all hands on deck, helping out. Practice was really different at that point too, because normally we're taught all of these things like, oh yeah, you're only going to pull one med at a time to like prevent mistakes. The one nice thing about the COVID unit, and don't practice this way, but since every patient in there was COVID and there was a Sally port that like separated it from the whole rest of the hospital, we would gown up in the nurses station and then be gowned up and be able to go in between the patients and just do hand hygiene, like with our gloves, wear extra sets of gloves in between patients. So you'd gown up once, and with that we would take bags, label them, and do like get each patient med in like a separate bag. And it felt so wrong because I was a new nurse and just like, oh my gosh, like I should only have this one patient's meds on me,
But you'd have all four
or five, yeah, okay. Just in separate bags.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was our workaround. Luckily never
to save
made
time.
Yeah, because otherwise you're gowning up completely, going out, de-gowning completely, cleaning, going in, gathering meds, gowning up completely. It was, which other units did do things like that, like the ICU and DOU at the time, the ones that they had on ventilators were up there. We would go up to BiPAP in our COVID unit. So a lot of people on Airvo, BiPAP, high flow cannula. But it was awful. I mean, people were just so scared, and I've bonded with patients before who've come back and are just like, oh my gosh, like, do you remember that COVID unit? Like, I have PTSD from that thing. I'm like, yeah, me too. Those were rough times. Like, ugh. Yeah, it's kind of wild too, because the worst part was when I think back on it, wasn't even that necessarily, because it was like I would talk to my coworkers afterwards and we would kind of just like trauma bond a little bit, but just trying to be around like people in real life during COVID, like my family. I was living at home at the time, and I would go through this whole routine of like going straight to the shower and like cleaning, sterilizing the shower and all this stuff. And I was working nights too, so if they're moving around the day, it could be disturbing. And they're just hearing about their struggles of being like, oh, we've kind of ran out of places to hike at because, we've just been getting paid a lot to stay at home during COVID. And I was just like, wow, that is like such a different problem than what we're dealing with at the hospital. And then in the hospital, the hardest thing I would say is actually the families, because
wanting to see their patient who's in like a secluded part of the hospital.
Yeah, and they would actually try to like break the windows sometimes. So you'd like see them kind of out there. Like some families were really, because I mean, there's a lot of controversy. Like some people didn't think it existed.
For sure.
So there were people there who didn't think it existed, and are just like, "What are you hiding?" And it's like, dude, trust me, we are just working our asses off here. Like, I want everybody out of here too, man. And the hardest thing I remember were the phone calls afterwards, because we would be so busy the entire shift. And then we'd have like messages on the phone of people just screaming at us, basically. Just like, what are you doing? Like, I haven't gotten a phone call all day. Like, are they even still alive? All this intense stuff, just like yelling understandably, at nursing staff, whoever took them in. And we'd have to be off shift, basically. Like, when the night nurse took over and be like, so tired, just like, I'm sorry. I'm just getting to the phone now. I've been, you're drenched in sweat in your isolation gown, just like, I did not have time to call you. Now someone else is on, I can call you. Like, this is where they're at and their oxygenation. And that was the other hard thing, is in school we learn all these treatments. Mm-hmm. And with COVID, like, we didn't really have treatments. We were basically just waiting for them to progress into ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome, and like be on a vent, or hopefully their body just kind of fights it. Eventually we got rifaximin, or I'm trying to remember what it is. It's an IV piggyback medication. They did find morphine kind of helped with just like dilation, and then proning them and having them cough a lot seemed to help a little bit. But in the beginning, there was like we were just giving them steroids, just kind of treating the symptoms, but not really the cause, and just seeing if they would progress well or just keep dialing up that oxygen. Whenever we kept dialing up the oxygen, we kind of knew. Once they got onto BiPAP, like each large device was kind of an extra nail in the coffin for a lot of these patients. And also just having them keep it on too, that was pretty scary as a new grad, just restraining people to keep the oxygen stuff on them.
You had to restrain people to keep it on?
Oh yeah.
They didn't want to keep it on?
Oh yeah, and sometimes we ran out of restraints and we'd have to like tape and stuff.
No.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
So you're literally like a COVID nurse survivor.
Yeah, I mean it's
That's crazy.
And yeah, you don't, and with the restraint thing too, you don't do that without, like, that would be a situation where you would call the family if they're not able to decide or anything. You have to make sure that's a proper order, you know, because that's where it feels awful to be a nurse, is like, you know, impeding somebody like that when they're scared and, you know, need it to survive. Medical restraints is what they call them. But yeah, as far as the family members though, that was like the hardest thing, was talking to family who's just like yelling at you, and it's like, you know, we're just here trying to help.
Why couldn't you call the family when they were calling you guys? Like, was there literally not enough time within those 12 hours to call?
Well, most of the time, yeah, like there would be entire shifts where you're just like, you get your meds and stuff in the morning, and then you're just kind of like gowned up.
Okay.
I remember feeling kind of smart because of evaporation. I was like sweating, and there are all the hand sanitizer things, and I like pump a bunch and like rub it all over myself, and I feel it like evaporate and get cooler. I'm like, oh, go back in and do stuff. And it's crazy too, because I hear about stories from like New York and stuff, and like those places had it gnarly. We were mostly in ratio. Like, I never went to 6 patients. I would have 5 tele patients occasionally, but like we were able to keep that part pretty under control. And yeah, I remember some of the more senior nurses were just like so amazing and nice, and they saw how bad we were struggling and would come and help us out, and were very reassuring and just like, it's never been this bad, like, don't give up. And I'm glad I didn't, because honestly at that time I was like 100%, I was like, wow, I made a career mistake, like should have gone engineering. This is awful.
You thought that?
This is 100%. I was just like, this is the worst thing ever. And
were they paying you guys well, overtime, bonuses?
You could pick up as many shifts as you wanted.
Okay. They were there.
They were there. I would rarely pick up. I was doing school at the time too, and was just like, I need my time away from the hospital. It was brutal, and it was definitely telling too. One day I did have a day off, and I went mountain biking with a friend, and like ate it, broke my hand, ripped up my face, got stitches. Yeah, I got like
Jesus,
these guys here,
gnarly.
And
on your day off,
my whole experience, I was honestly stoked and would like do it again in a heartbeat. I was like, I had 2 paid weeks off of work, and I was like, I need to live more dangerously. Like, dude, this is so much better and less painful than like the daily work life.
Yeah.
Ugh. Yeah. It was, and then that was kind of telling. I was like, man, this is ridiculous. But luckily, eventually, with the whole COVID thing, it kind of took a slope down, and, you know, less and less of those patients. They tried to hire a bunch of travelers. The pay is definitely something to be salty about. There were some, one of my coworkers, her husband's a firefighter, and I guess a lot of the places that, you know, treated COVID so acutely got like these big bonuses from the state, and the firefighters, they got their bonus, and the company like just spread it evenly among the employees. And I didn't see how much our company got, but we like there was no, other than our just hourly pay, if you picked up bonuses, like we just got like, I mean, I got less than I get now because I've gotten raises, but yeah, there was no bonus other than I think a couple years later they did give just anyone general straight to your paycheck from state of California or federal. I don't remember what one. It was like $500, which was sick. I appreciated that, you know. But yeah, the whole COVID nursing thing was definitely sucky as a new grad, but coming out of it is really nice. I mean, it's really cool to like feel more comfortable in my practice and it just be genuinely so much easier, and people being in better moods too. There's also just like, I feel like right after that, like a dead zone just in that, like nurses were just burnt out, really jaded, not nice to the patients and families. I mean, they still would try to be, but after a traumatic event like that, a lot of us were just like, it was really hard to go to work, and you know, didn't really matter how much they were offering. Bonuses went as high as $850 plus your extra $100, so an extra like $950 plus time and a half to show up, and people were still like you can't make me go in there. It was brutal. Yeah, I mean, people were picking it up when it got that high. They would, for sure, especially the more senior nurses who were like, you know, they can put up that wall. But when you're new, and definitely the students, I see it a lot, it's like patients have, you know, like a real emotional impact on you, and you genuinely care a lot, and that's awesome. And to function through a event like that, it's so much easier if you're able to put up like a good, like professional wall, essentially, where you're doing your job, you're still, you know, acting empathetic, but you have that barrier to where you're still protecting yourself, versus as a new grad, I wasn't really protecting myself versus from what was going on. And it was just like, it was a lot. And yeah, going out of it was just really refreshing. Going to day shift was when it started slowing down too. That was nice. I mean, day shift was, a lot of it too was, I'm not a great sleeper in general, so to have to like have my schedule flipped, and doing the BSN program too, we would have every other Thursday like 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. in class thing, so to like flip your nights to days.
Gnarly.
Every once in a while for a bunch of class was also, and I also had clinicals during the day.
Were you seeing a lot of the patients like dying?
Not me personally. I did, whenever they get to comfort care on my COVID unit, yes, but the family would have to make that decision, or they would. But as far as like a traumatic death, not so much. If they were like really fighting it and families like, no, go, they would eventually progress to vents on like ICU floor.
Did they have room for the patients?
I don't think we ever ran out of vents at our facility, so we were really fortunate. We never ran out of vents, never ran out of PPE. It was more so just the staffing situation of, imagine an entire extra unit that no one hired for, that's just pulling all the resources. And yeah, it made the other units like really unbearable, because they tried to keep because the COVID ones were the most like, oh, we don't even really know what's going on, so they would try to actually keep your ratio a little better there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was, and then also the other thing is they just put a lot of pressure on the nurses, at least at my facility. They try to really limit exposure to the COVID patients, so like only the nurse would go in there. They were having the nurses do all of the lab draws and everything as well, like the morning labs, which I was cool with, because I'm like, oh, this is my comfort zone. That was my favorite time. I'm like, yes, morning labs, this is what I know how to do. Confidently go in there and get it.
Start an IV, or no, just poking with a needle?
just poking with a needle, seeing what labs are ordered, what labs they need. And a lot of the nurses, they don't regularly do that at my facility, so there were some pretty funny mishaps. One of my coworkers did they didn't realize they're vacutainer tubes and is used to like pushing down on the plunger. So she did that and just exploded a blood bomb basically in the room. Because if you just like keep putting pressure on it, you know, it'll pop open. Yeah. It does it on its own with the vacutainer.
So it's just blood mist everywhere.
More just like like a big splat. Like the whole thing just blew open. It was just like, luckily PPE and everything, but just if you took a 10 cc little small amount of blood and just threw it in the room, that's kind of what happened. But we had to do a bunch of extra rolls to like limit contact with the patients, and it was just a lot of pressure activity on the nurses. And I mean, ultimately I think we did a pretty good job of limiting exposure, and the unit was, despite it being like scary and awful psychologically for the patients, it was infection control wise like a pretty good spot. So yeah, it was definitely interesting going through that whole COVID. I apologize. I feel like I'm all over the place with the story. It's just like
we're
man.
flowing right now.
Okay,
like,
cool.
You're in flow mode. I'm like, I have a queue of questions.
Oh, cool,
like,
cool.
I'm literally just like waiting for my moments and stuff.
Sweet. Yeah. I mean, I